My name is Maz, and my presentation is based on Chapter 13, Self and Personality. So, personality is basically consisting of a person's typical thoughts, expressions, and behaviors that he does throughout his life. And your sense of self basically involves all the mental representation, and those mental representations are known as self schemas, and those mental organization of information affects your behavior and personality. And the examples of self schemas could be confident or dependent. And you can also get a better understanding of yourself is by working self-concept, and working self-concept refers to an immediate experience of something or some event at that particular moment, and it can vary from time to time. So how so self-esteem is how you feel about your own sense of self. So self-esteem basically relies and revolves around a idea known as reflective appraisal. And reflective appraisal is basically a process or an evaluation of your own personality by other people, how they view you, if they accept you or reject you in the society. And like if there are a lot of people that are rejecting your self-esteem is going to be low, as said by the sociometer theory. And if a lot of people accept you and praise you, then you're going to have a higher self-esteem than the other people, and you're going to so basically what it's tracked by self-esteem. So basically inclusion is tracking self-esteem, and self-esteem is regulated by affiliativeness. Sorry. Okay, so basically, so everybody has this ideology of making their own selves better than others and keeping their positive selves out there. So basically, a lot of people have positive illusions. They could have self-absorbing biases. They could also have different social comparisons they would do to other people. And so basically what this means is that positive illusions are like saying that I'm better than, not really the other person, but like positive illusions is like saying they're unrealistic favorable attitudes that people have toward their own self. So they believe that they're better. They're better, pretty much, and they know positively that they can do better in this world. And then with social comparison, so then a person with a high self-esteem would have downward comparison to the people who are inferior to him, and a person with low self-esteem then would have upward comparisons to make his self feel better a little. And upward comparison basically meaning like he will have comparison to the people who are superior to him. And then there are temporal comparisons. So temporal comparisons are basically saying that a person comparing his own self to a current self to the previous self that he had. So basically saying that a person basically got promoted from a very small position to a very high position, so he's going to be comparing himself and feeling better about it. So that's how you get your positive sense of self. And the self-serving bias is that people basically thinking, like the people with high self-esteem tend to make assumptions about their life that they're going to be successful and they're not going to have any troubles because this world is a better place for them. And then we come into the ideology about collectivist and individualistic. So collectivist and individualistic concept comes from Harry Triandis in 1989, when he noted that a lot of people actually emphasize their collective selves than their personal selves. And he came up with that so basically individualistic people are basically people with freedom and self-expression and basically having the ability to understand their true selves. And so basically in those individualistic communities like United States, Canada, Italy, Spain, is basically that children are encouraged to be self-reliant and deal with daily life stressors. While in the collectivist societies, it's usually connections between family, ethnic groups, and not really having much revolving around your own self and not understanding about your own abilities. And then we come into So that's how you can understand somebody's personality. And then we come into the psychodynamic theory. The psychodynamic theory is basically introduced by Sigmund Freud. And what he states over here is that ID is basically a basic level. It's basically ID exists at basic level, and it's basically submerged into the unconscious aspect of life. And what it does is that it operates your pleasure principle. So basically, the person is going to be trying to seek for pleasure and no pain. So in this case, somebody wants a cake, let's say, but your super ego comes in, and super ego is that the social standards and moral standards of the society, and then it's like restricting you from the things you want to do. And so basically it's going to be like you're on a diet, but then that ego theory is going to come in, and that ego is basically the reality principle and the rational thought and problem solving. So it's going to help you understand and make a decision and not get in conflict with your own thoughts, your hidden memories, and your hidden wishes, as said by Sigmund Freud, and that ego resolves that problem. So then we come to humanistic approach. So humanistic approach was introduced by Carl Rogers and his colleagues. So what humanistic approach emphasizes is that your goodness, your own unique goodness, and your own self-understanding about your own self. So there are two things you gotta know about this is the conditions of worth and the unconditional positive regard. So conditions of worth is that a person behaving in a certain way so that he could be felt loved. So if a child, he doesn't feel loved if like spilling something on the ground or like coloring on the walls, and he's not being loved by his parents, he's not gonna have a better understanding about his own self, and he's gonna do things that what his or her parents really want. So he's gonna drift away and come into self discrepancies, making it harder for him to understand his true self. While with the unconditional positive regard, it helps children and that helps people understand their own true selves. So basically, the child is going to be praised by its parents no matter what the behavior is, if it's bad or good, so he could understand his true self and make a better understanding of what he really is. And so basically, with unconditional positive regard, you're going to have self-actualization. So you're going to be understanding about yourself, understanding about your achievements, understanding about how you're going to be successful about your life. It's going to be completely centering around you. But in the conditional positive regard, or known as the conditions of worth, is basically going to be leading to self-discrepancies, which is going to make some barriers in your mind, not able to think right and process it, what do you really want for your own self, rather than you're going to be trying to make others happy rather than feeling kind of miserable about your own self because you don't know about your own self because you haven't developed the ideology of your own personality. And then there's the Unsink Theory and the five-factor theory. So basically, what this talks about is how you can understand about your own personality. So openness is basically imagination, how low to the ground you are, or how imaginative and curious you are. So if you're more curious, you're going to score high, as said by Einstein. And if you're going to score low, is because if you're a very practical person and have very conventional thoughts. And with conscientiousness is basically competence, and basically self-discipline. So if you're more hardworking and organized, you're going to be placed on a higher spectrum than the other people who are unorganized and don't really want to do stuff in life. And then extroversion is basically about the introverts and extroverts. So if you're more extrovert and you're more social with other people, you're going to be placed on a higher rank than the introverts who are basically not really outgoing and want to stay home. And with agreeableness is basically how you cooperate and basically how good natured you are. So basically, if you're uh, helpful and trustworthy and honest to other people, you're going to be on the higher spectrum than the other people who are very critical and uncooperative. And then last but not least is the neuroticism. Neuroticism is basically a tendency towards unstable conditions. So with this being said, if you're very anxious, unhappy, angry at very moments, you're going to be scored on a higher spectrum than the other people who are more happy and generous and kind and helpful to other people. And this scale helps you understand about your own personality, about what you really are, if you're more agreeable to the society or if you're more neuroticism to this neurotic to the society. Sorry. And then your biological aspects also help you understand about your personality and affect your personality. So in an extroverted person, the optimal arousal level is going to be very low as compared to the introverted person whose optimal arousal level my bad, the other way around. The introvert is going to have an optimal level arousal very low as compared to the extroverted person who's going to have optimal arousal level very high because he's more outgoing and he wants more arousal to be more socially active, and as compared to the introvert people then don't really want because they already are hitting at the high maximum amount. So that's why they're always quiet and chill in a certain situation. And with twin studies, it explains that if you're the twins share personality traits, and about 40 to 60% of that personality variability is seen in those individuals. And then temperaments are basically innate, and they're biologically it's basically a person's nature, and they're innate. And it basically affects the person's behavior and personality. So there's some examples of some temperaments. So a sanguine person will be more popular and happy as compared to the choleric person, who's going to be more strong-willed child and who's going to be more of a powerful child, and the phlegmatic child is going to be more like quiet at certain times. And personality is also influenced by situations. So basic tendencies are usually biological as compared to the characteristic adaptations is due to the situation. So basically, an extroverted person will be having some differences as he ages. He's going to be still extroverted even though he's old, but he's going to be in a different way. That's the characteristic adaptations to his situation. And the personality could be assessed by these four assessments: the projective measure, the self-report measures, the observational methods, and it also could be influenced by the electronic activated records. And this is my works cited, and thank you for listening to me, but I'm very sorry again. It's not really a high standard presentation, but I tried my best. Thank you.